So welcome. Thank you everybody for joining the webinar today. I hope you can hear us all okay. I'd first of all like to start by introducing the team a little bit. It's about how to build a successful ABM tech stack for 2020. I'm going to check that everybody could hear. So yeah, I got a quick hi in the chat there. So could somebody just confirm that they can see the screen as well? So just a quick hi. We can hear, everyone can see. Happy days, great. Okay, that's good to see. Okay, so let me get back into my presentation here. So just around how to build a successful ABM tech stack for 2020. So I'll get into it in a minute about my experience, and then my co-host Alex will also get into a little bit around his experience. But I wanted to raise this topic because I feel like ABM is going down a similar street to the likes of acronyms such as AI and things like big data and all those buzzwords that I would say scared off a lot of people and were overused. Now, ABM, from my perspective, is something that people have been doing for a long time. Anybody that's been segmenting lists or creating target markets or anybody that's created an SDR call list has been doing some form of ABM, maybe not as personalized as what you can get to nowadays because of the technology available to people. But ABM has been, or account-based marketing has been something that's been a topic for a long, long time. So it's nothing new per se. But let me get into my experience first and foremost and introduce myself. So my name is Andy Culligan. I'm the CMO at Leadfeeder. My experience in ABM stems for maybe the past 5 or 6 years, maybe even a little bit longer. I've been in a couple of other tech companies, working in very crowded spaces as well. And the ABM strategy has worked incredibly well for me there. And to be honest with you, the thing that I've found which works very well from an ABM perspective is simply just being able to speak to people on their level. You know, you're treating your potential customers or prospects and also existing business as though they're people. And this is something that a lot of marketers, salespeople as well, get wrong. We tend to think people as numbers. We don't actually think of the person at the end of the phone or the person at the end of an advertisement as an actual person, right? And from my perspective, account-based marketing solves that. And I'll bring you through some of my experience, also some of the tools that I've used, and how to build that technology stack in order to get the most success out of your ABM campaigns. Now, joining me today, I've got Alex Ollie, who's a co-founder of ReachDesk, and I'll let Alex do a quick introduction of himself.
Oh, thanks, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been a big fan of Leadfeeder, so it's a real honor. For those of you who don't know, ReachDesk, we're a B2B sending platform. So it allows sales and marketing professionals to send personalized direct mail and gifts directly from your CRM so that you can integrate it seamlessly within an ABM strategy or your overall marketing sales strategy. It's interesting when you asked me to do this with you because we were kind of born, we kind of say we were born account-based. Starting from scratch, over 2 years ago, we've been able to build out this kind of account-based marketing strategy using some of the tools that we're going to talk about. So I'm really pumped to share some of that, and thanks for having me.
Excellent. Okay, so let's start just quickly with Leadfeeder or with ABM just as a strategy and how that works. Just to give you some structure and also thought process behind why things have changed slightly in the world of marketing and sales. So if we look at account-based marketing, it's called a flipped funnel approach. So traditionally, and when I first started doing demand gen and lead generation was one of the things that I did for a long period of time, was starting to create awareness up at the very top of the funnel. And then when you have a lot of awareness at the top of the funnel, you get people to your website, or you get people to landing pages, or you get people to events, or whatever it might be. Get them to convert, okay? Get them to do a meaningful activity with you, get them to download a white paper, visit you at an event, send them a direct mail, etc., etc., etc. So what you do is you gather interest by getting them converted, and then what you would do then afterwards, you would then pick up the phone, give them a call, and then they would turn into an opportunity and then probably a purchase. So it starts very broad at the top of the funnel, and then it starts to trickle down until you get a very low volume, or not a low volume, but until you get the customers that will be interested in purchasing from you. Now, if we look at account-based marketing, you're actually, before you start, you're identifying the people that you want to speak with. So what you want to do is you want to create your list of companies which are a best fit, and then start targeting those list of companies, and then start targeting within those companies the list of people in which you know as a persona that wants to buy from you. And then on top of that, you start to personalize the things that you are sending to people. So based on the personas and the companies that you're dealing with, you know which type of content you want to send them, what's the right channel to send them. And then once you've actually turned those people into customers, you don't just stop there. So you still keep them engaged. You still turn them then into advocates via using the same content or similar content to which got them there in the first place. So it's actually just creating a loop across from when somebody starts to when they finish, or not finish, or is they're ongoing in business. But it's a different approach in that you're recognizing the accounts before you begin. Whereas previously, the accounts would start to come to you based on the content that you were pushing out. So it's a slightly different approach, but there are the tools and processes in place nowadays to enable it to be done quite easily. Alex, just from your side, in terms of some of the stuff that you guys talk about at ReachDesk, do you want to bring us through this part here?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I love what you were saying there, Andy, in terms of the flipping the funnel approach. From my experience in the conversations we have all the time at the moment, to really make that work, you've got to get past a couple of things. One is really simple. This has to you have to get buy-in throughout the whole organization. So not just marketing and sales sitting together going, how do we make this work? But the CEO, the interns, everyone. If you get buy-in, then it's really important. So when you've got that flip funnel in place, with ReachDesk, what we do is we help you identify the moments that matter within that flip funnel approach, so that you can start strategically targeting the prospects, the existing customers, the opportunities you've got, whether that's you're a new tech company looking to smash it in the US, and you need to start by educating your buyers on who you are within the audience you've chosen, down to the fact that you've got an opportunity and actually forecasted it, and you need to be sending something relevant to help it close. So that really important moment where you're onboarding a new customer, or you've got other products that you've acquired, or you can upsell to them. So you can use ReachDesk strategically throughout every single touch point of your ABM strategy, using physical gifting, event tickets, even down to the simple handwritten note. So yeah, that's kind of how we position it.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. I like one of the things that I've always spoken about with teams that I've run. So I've managed SDR teams as well as marketing teams under one, to try to create that alignment between marketing and sales. And the number one thing that I always spoke about, and anybody that worked with me before will say, like, alignment is the number one thing here. And you can see this across the bottom of this slide, that you've got marketing, business development, sales, and customer success all working together. Typically what tends to happen just naturally or organically in organizations is each of these different departments start to work in silos. So you've got marketing chasing one thing, sales and business development somewhat chasing the same thing as marketing, but can differ somewhat. And customer success tends to be broken away quite a bit from both of those departments as well. So just on the marketing and BDR at sales side, by everybody focusing on the same list of accounts, you can be pretty sure that everybody's going to be wanting each other to succeed. So a lot of the times people ask me questions around, what's the attribution modeling look like from an ABM perspective? Does that not get very tricky? Like what percentage comes from inbound? What percentage comes from outbound? The lines get very blurry is my experience in it. But what you'll start to see is that if everybody starts to work together a little bit more, the results will come in, right? And when the results start coming in, you'll start to realize that your ABM efforts are working. So just a note there, the alignment piece is incredibly important, but it will naturally come with an ABM approach.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, a lot of the conversations, particularly for marketing, the MQL for many is dying. An MQL is sort of this sort of static lead. It's been scored, and what I'm seeing is a lot more businesses actually having marketing having like a shared revenue goal with sales. Now that used to scare people 5 years ago, but that's actually being embraced now. So the more businesses that aren't just aligned on the concept, but also share the actual revenue goal behind it, is becoming an essential piece to this too.
Fully agree. In my opinion, any marketing team nowadays needs to be part of the commercial organization, and therefore should have a revenue goal. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, they're there to ensure that new customers are brought in as well as keep existing ones. So it's a mix of both new business acquisition as well as retention. So, okay, we'll move on quickly, Alex. I wanted to simplify, or we wanted to simplify account-based marketing today, because, as I said, there's a lot of hype and a lot of buzz around it, and a couple of things come to mind when people talk about it. First of all, do they have the resource to do it? Do they have the budget to do it? It's very expensive to do it, which is in people's minds. Typically, you can go very expensive, but if you get the right tech stack in place, you don't need to go too expensive at all. So let's go through these 4 steps, and then afterwards, what we'll do is we'll go through the exact tech that can be used in order to get there. Okay. So step 1 in terms of any type of account-based marketing strategy, and I'm seeing quite a few questions come in here, and we'll have a bit of time for questions at the end. So I will start to read out those questions towards the end of the presentation. Okay. So step 1, just in terms of what you need to do to get started. So as a company, you should recognize who your ideal customer profile is. So if we look at things like firmographics, technographics, intent, so understand your customer base, right? And once you've gotten the key characteristics of who you want to win as a customer, it makes life a lot easier. So Alex, just from your perspective at ReachDesk, what type of ICP do you guys have?
Yeah, we've actually got 3 tiers, but let's just focus on the tier 1. So we're looking, company size is actually quite important. We didn't think it used to be, but that can come down to like the number of employees. So the real sweet spot is somewhere between, I'll say it's like 300 to 800 employees, because those are like the low-hanging fruit, as it were. Generally based, we offer our solution globally, but generally like EMEA and in the US is like the real sweet spot. We do focus a lot on B2B, so it's mainly like software, analytics, SaaS, that side of things, and we do look into the growth element to it. If you're in a hyper growth mode, then you're going to really embrace this, because those are the businesses that take this seriously. And then we do often delve into the sort of the ACV of the annual contract value of those businesses, and those are just the firmographics that we look at. What's really interesting for us is you can use certain tools to start discovering the types of tech people use. So because we integrate with your existing tech stack, like your HubSpot, your Marketo, Outreach, SalesLoft, those kind of businesses, Salesforce, we can start looking into the type of technology you already use, and then start going, well, actually, we can refine that list a bit more and start going after the ones that complement our solution. And then we also can say, well, look, we're in quite an immature state, so we don't look at competition too much, because we're quite a new industry. But for those out there who are in a more advanced industry, where it's high level of competition, you can start looking into things like how long has your competitor been used by that prospect you're going after, what's the average sort of tenancy there, and when are they looking to come up for renewal. So those are like the main technographic and firmographic elements to how we target and we build that ICP. And on top of that, we start looking at the intent data behind that ICP. So we have done for a while, we use Leadfeeder to see who's visiting what on our website, so that we can match that back to our ICP and start going, well, actually, these guys are reading this. So that they're going to be a more mature state in our ICP as well. So actually, you can build in intent on top of firmographics and technographics as well. Yeah,
something from here as well, Alex, just that, I've used quite a bit in the past, and in terms of some people don't know where to start. A good starting point for me sometimes is looking at which prospects your competitors are with. That's normally a good start. So if you're in the tech space, for example, it's something that you can figure out pretty easily using a piece of software such as BuiltWith, where you'll be able to find out, okay, if they're using a competitive technology, let's go pull that entire list of those companies using that technology. In most industries is the same. You just need to know what the data point is and then be able to pull that list. That should then be able to give you some sort of feedback in terms of, okay, I can start here and then look at what are the unique points about each of those different prospects. But okay, so if we look at that, then we've figured out who our ideal customer is. Then what we need to do is, based off of that, we can pull our total addressable market. So as I just mentioned there before, you could use a specific data point, such as competitive intelligence, so know which accounts your competitors work with, pull that entire list of accounts. From my side, there's a couple of different tools that could be used, tools that I've used before, and these are just some recommendations, but there are many out there, as you can see in this G2 crowd. index here. Some recommendations on things that I've used before, such as are things such as Zoom Info and Built With. Essentially what this is building out every single account in which you can sell to, okay, based on those ideal customer profile criteria, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're going into a big database and you're pulling out an entire list of accounts. Those accounts will have certain data points against them. You can use a mix of Zoom Info with Built With. Built With is strong when it comes to tech recognition, for example, understanding which technologies are being used on people's sites. So what it does is it simply just fires a tag and then understands exactly what technology is there and since when it's been there. But as we can see here, there are a huge amount there, which you can work with. And the point here is to try to get that list as comprehensive as possible. Once you have that list of all of those companies in which you can work with, you can look at things such as Alex just mentioned there, a couple of tiers that they use at ReachDesk. I would typically tier it into 3 different types of customers. So the tiers could be, must win, nice to win, and maybe like a long-term win, right? Or you could base them off of revenue. You could say, okay, these are the top line revenue people, or the top line revenue companies. These are the ones that are going to bring us the most revenue. And then tier 2 could be slightly less revenue, and tier 3 then even less than that, right? With that, you have to understand where you put your marketing efforts and your sales efforts, so you can understand the cost per acquisition a little bit better, so that you're not going around spending marketing dollars crazily on tier 3 customers where they're not that high in value, right? Alex, anything else that you want to add there from a ReachDesk perspective?
Yeah, I said the tiers that we use are very similar to what you just said. We have like elephants, deers, and rabbits. You can sort of do a multiplier on the average contract value of which would fit into which tier, and then work out what your ARR would be if you won that many. We have also used kind of offline resources like the Martech 5000, which is like the Martech 8000 now, because that's a real sweet spot for us. And then you can actually get access to lists of those businesses really quickly. You go on the, I think it's Martech CMO page, and you can literally just pull that as a full Excel spreadsheet, and all of a sudden you've got a really well data mined subsection of your ICP ready to go. So it can be as simple as that, right? But yeah, I'd say we've used that, and we've used businesses like Zoom Info which has a sub business called Datanize, so you can start running the kind of tech that your competitors use, or that your prospects use, so that you can plug that in as well.
Yeah, there was just one question come in here just around one thing that I said around a big database. Michael, I'm referring to, when I say larger database, I'm referring to something like Zoom Info that has information on companies. So it has millions of companies in their database, as well as contact information on those companies. So if you want to run a job title query, for example, within those companies, will also give you those people plus contact details, right? And then what you want to do is you want to sync that into your CRM, okay? I just wanted to clarify that. The rest of the questions we'll get to a little bit later, but for now we'll move on. The third step is around finding those relevant personas in those accounts. So once you've created your ICP, you've created your ideal customer profile, you've now got the data of those accounts, so you know which accounts you're going to go chasing, you know which tiers you have within those accounts, so you can understand your business model a little bit better in terms of who do I need to sell to within those accounts. What you need to do is you need to start finding those people to start selling to within those accounts. So as we can see from this cartoon here, we can see it that traditionally we didn't have a huge amount of persona information or contact information. So traditionally we'd be looking at things like gender or location or age. Nowadays we can get a lot more granular on that. So for example, a couple of things in which is very helpful with the personas piece. So think about whenever you go into a sales cycle, how many people are you typically selling to, okay? There's been some studies done over the past couple of years, especially by a company called Terminus, where they recognize that when you're selling or when you're doing semi-complex sales, you tend to be selling to about 6 different people. So even from a Leadfeeder perspective, when I think of the sales cycle, or when we get into a sales cycle, we're probably selling to a couple of different departments, so marketing and sales. And then there's going to be a number of people within those different organizations in which we'll be selling based on the size of the organization, of course. But it could be anything from somebody a little bit junior all the way up to mid-management to senior management, from a marketing perspective. And then from a sales perspective, you could have a couple of different layers, such as sales enablement being one, which is basically the team that are involved in putting tools in front of the sales team to make them more efficient. Then you're also going to have the individual reps themselves. Then you could have a VP of sales, you could have a CRO. So there's a number of different people you're going to be selling to. You just need to recognize who those people are and what are their characteristics. So what are their job titles, for example, right? That's the second part. So who are we actually selling to? You know, so what are those job titles? What are the levels within those organizations in which we want to sell into? And then what we need to start doing is getting the contact details of those people. So there are a number of different tools in which you can do that. So if we think about this in building blocks, what we've done now is we've recognized who our ideal customer is. We've pulled that entire list of all those accounts. Now we've recognized who we want to sell to within those accounts. So what are the job titles? Now we need to start recognizing, okay, who are those people individually? So what's their contact details? So what's their email address? What's their phone number, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a couple of different tools that you can use. Of course, depending on your region, you need to be careful with GDPR. So I just want to make that, want to give that disclaimer there. This can vary across regions. However, when you deal with one of these data providers, they will be able to give you advice there. So some of the data providers that I've worked with that have worked very well is LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Apollo, Lusha, LeadIQ, ZoomInfo, and Cognism. Alex, from your side, you've mentioned that you've worked with Cognism before, for example. What's your experience in gathering this persona information or contact information into these accounts?
I think it's really simple. Try and keep it as simple as possible, right? A lot of people make the mistake of trying to build out like 15 to 20 personas, and actually all they're really doing is they're pulling in job titles. Whereas if you create a persona, like it could be an account-based magician for your ABM marketing manager, for example, you can give them names, you can make it fun, but make sure that that within that you have the job titles as a subcategory, but the persona is the guidance, right? You don't want to try and perfect this and build a really like rigid framework. You're trying to guide your sales and marketing and customer success team to work towards the same persona. But yeah, I think I picked out some of the businesses here as well, like Cognism. They're obviously like the leaders over here in EMEA, and you have the ZoomInfos, which might work a bit better in over in the US. So yeah, when you're reviewing those kind of systems, sometimes you've got to accept that you might have to buy more than one, really.
Certainly. My general experience with this, Alex, is everybody has good US data. UK data can be varied. Germany and the DACH region is very tricky to get data on, and then APAC is anybody's guess. This is my typical experience there. But as Alex mentioned, yeah, just to reiterate, like you should be looking to use a mix of those different pieces, and just instead of like cracking our heads around this and trying to take the complication out of this, just think of these as phone books. That's essentially all they are, is a phone book that enables you to gather contacts and to give those across over to your sales team to be picking up the phone if you have an SDR team to be doing outbound, as well as your marketing team to be focusing on those guys for individualized campaigns, which I'll get to a little bit later. There are some tools out there to be able to focus on the individual.
Yeah, I think just to add on that last point, I think some businesses don't value data enough. I think some businesses just want to get the cheapest bang for the buck. Invest in data. In my book, data comes before process. Without it, you can't really do much. So invest in this heavily, because it's going to be the thing that really drives this forward.
I agree. Okay, so let's get on to the execution. And for the execution part, I've used a real life example with a fake company. So let's use company Beep. Okay, so what Beep does is they're a technology company for retail. So they offer a specific type of technology which helps people in store and online. They have a small commercial team of about 3 marketers and 7 salespeople. So a commercial team of 10 people, and their main focus is growing in the UK market. Okay, so step 1 for these guys is focus on, how do we get this ICP? And it's as simple as just putting a statement out there in terms of, okay, what industry are we focused on? Retail. Okay. What are the characteristics of those retailers? Well, we want to be working with retailers that have an online and offline presence. So they both have brick and mortar stores as well as an e-commerce site, right? We also want to be looking, we want to break that list down a little bit, because anybody that sells anything online and offline is probably going to be a bit too broad for us. and they may not be able to afford our technology. Therefore, we should look at, okay, so let's go with anything that's sort of 40 million GBP per annum. Okay, so we know that our key target market's the UK, so that's the location bit. We've got our industry bit, and we know that we have an additional layer in there to understand that they both have e-commerce as well as an online or as well as an offline presence. Okay, so what do? We use that ICP to gather the data, as we mentioned before. So let's figure out who's in that total addressable market. These are all of our companies. Okay. Now, typically, what could happen here is that you try to pull that data, and you end up with a list that's maybe too small, for example. So based on the 40 million in revenue, anything over 40 million in revenue. So what you could do then is say, okay, well, that leaves our total addressable market pretty small. I want to broaden this a little bit. Let's bring that revenue bit down to 20 million or 10 million, anything over 10 million. And then what you can typically do with that then afterwards is put it into the different tiers. So you say, okay, anything with over 40 million is my tier 1. Anything with 20 to 40 million is my tier 2. And then anything below 20 million in annual revenue is my tier 3. Okay. So what you can do with this company is using HubSpot as their CRM, for example. You can take the data from ZoomInfo and BuiltWith. ZoomInfo being, again, that tool that you can use to pull those companies from. BuiltWith being similar, you can pull companies from, as well as what technology they're using. For example, you can use a mix of both. In this example, they're using ZoomInfo to pull the companies. Companies are then synced into the HubSpot CRM. Then they also want to ping they also want to ping the BuiltWith database to understand what technology those companies are currently using on their websites, for example. And BuiltWith then populates that into HubSpot CRM as well. Alex, in terms of like what you guys do at ReachDesk, is this completely foreign concept to you, or is this a normal way of building a TAM?
Yeah, it's very normal. We do add a couple of other layers. I think the important bit about TAM is don't just create one for the next 3 years and then stick to that list. Like, refresh it probably monthly. We refresh our lists every couple of weeks. So make sure that this is evolving. Some businesses will start moving into your TAM, some won't move out. You don't want to be stuck with a list and then at the end of the year well, that's kind of gone stale. So there are really easy ways to continuously refresh this so that the businesses that you're going after are always relevant.
It's a very good point. And especially because, especially for this company, Beep, in the retail space, people go out of business very quickly. They can be big growth companies one day, and then the next company they're going out of business. So it's very important that you're not marketing to companies that have gone out of business, because that's a waste of money, obviously. So yeah, as you just to reiterate your point there, Alex, it's very important to keep on top of this. And typically, I would have somebody own this, either on the marketing team or the sales team. In Leadfeeder, we have a couple of owners on it at the moment, and they're within the marketing org. So in the past, I've had other people working with me that have owned all of the marketing technology as well as the total addressable market. In other companies, sales enablement might own it, the sales team may own it, but it's important that you have somebody there that's managing those tools to make sure that they're constantly updating the database, and the database in this case being the HubSpot CRM. Step 3, for Beep, they've got a number of different personas in which they recognize in the sales cycles in which they're in. So who are the people that they need to be selling to? So they're dealing with a lot of data. So that's the part of them is dealing with data. So they're selling into CRM managers, heads of CRM, senior managers of CRM. There's also, in the retail space nowadays, a lot of people involved in digital transformation. So turning companies which would typically be offline, turning them into digital companies or digital organizations. E-commerce directors, managers, heads of online or offline retail, head of, manager, senior manager, and then also sometimes in the C-suite. So people that would be interested in this particular piece of tech would be chief technology officer, chief marketing officer, or chief revenue officer. It's all around growth and technology, hence why those people within those different areas in the C-suite would be interested. What I would recommend to do for this company would be to try to break it down into different buckets. So the thing here is that with Beep, they only have 3 marketers and they have 7 salespeople. So I would suggest, okay, let's look at where the different people here or these different personas get involved in the buying process. I would say, for example, number 5, the C-suite doesn't get involved until later on, right? And maybe you could test it to say, okay, maybe they get involved early on, but then they push the information down to the lower tiers within the organization. And then those lower tiers are the people that then push forward with it. And then the CMO or CRO or CTO might be the signatories on signing off something like this, right? You need to figure that out. But based on that, you could probably put these guys into different buckets. With those different buckets, what you can start to do is create content, right? Create content which is applicable to those people, messaging which is applicable to those people. But you're basically just want to be making sure, okay, I've recognized these personas. I understand what their needs are. I understand what their pain points are. Now it's for me to start, dealing with my content marketing team in a way that I can get content which is meaningful to these people. So what is the type of content that you want to be pushing their way in order for them to get converted, right? Conversion meaning from an outbound perspective, so giving across to your sales team to push out to these people. So by email cadences or phone call or whatever it might be, or direct mail in Alex's case, or to your online team to be pushing out by paid campaigns, or the type of content that you're dragging to your website via blog posts and organic stuff that you're doing there as well. So Alex, is there anything here that's sticking out to you as being like, hey, yeah, we do that as well, and this all makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, look, it certainly makes sense. I think I'm not going to add too much onto creating your personas. I think that's quite obvious for businesses, whether you're starting out or you're mature. I think going into the content piece is really tough. Everyone has this beautiful idea. I'm speaking to a lot of people now for 2020. They're going, oh, we're going to start building this content strategy. And they'll probably get to January and maybe nothing's been written, nothing's been changed. My opinion on content is very simple. Don't just create content to sell to people. I spent a brief stint as a lawyer, and I remember our marketing team always used to just push content about law and educating people on GDPR. And if you think about that, and it just bores people. Whereas actually, if you think about what the lawyers like, they like golf. So start writing about golf courses as well, and like the kind of places where they hang out, and put that in the areas where they might spend their personal time, because people buy from people at the end of the day. So if you can start creating content which isn't just about your product and selling, but actually is something that person's interested about, which you can link to your business, then that's where you really win. Fully
agree. There was just one question that came in there a minute ago, just around the content that we're producing or that we're sending out here around, actually mentioning the tech that's been used. In a second, I will get to the actual technologies. I'll give you an overview of the exact technologies that you can use in every single stage of this. I think it's important, or myself and Alex sat down and discussed how we present this, this building the stack. It's important to understand what the different pieces of technology are for, and the overall idea behind the ABM piece, along connected with the technologies, to make sure that that you're using them correctly. So over the next couple of slides, there will be a good overview of the exact technology which can be used in order to get where you need to be. So as I mentioned before, a couple of slides back, just around getting those personas. So using the phone book technology. So for example, in this case, they couldn't get everything that they needed from ZoomInfo. So they decided, okay, ZoomInfo data is quite good. They're using it for other markets, such as the US, which they've already done well in, but they need more info, or they need more more data points. Therefore, they said, okay, well, let's try Lead IQ, and it gave them more data. So what they're doing is they're populating those total addressable market accounts with those exact contact details. So you can use those two tools. So for example, ZoomInfo and Lead IQ, which will directly populate into your HubSpot CRM, enabling both sales and marketing to go in there and market and from an inbound and outbound perspective to those specific contacts. Okay. Here's in terms of the execution side of things and personalizing it to the next level. So we've got two different types of execution, obviously offline and online execution. From a perspective, let's take it from a marketing perspective. The online side, with the different channels that we have, there's a great tool out there called Influ2. And with Influ2, you're essentially able to target people on their individual level and have personalized ads. So that might even be down as far as actually saying, hey, Andy, why don't you come and try to buy Influ2, for example, right? Whatever the ad copy may be. That's obviously terrible copy. Don't use that, please. But Influ2 is a great tool which connects up with your CRM. Based on the data that you have in your CRM, it will take specific personalization points, which you decide upon. So you'll have a specific field in your CRM system, whether it's first name or whether it's a specific pain point. That pain point will then be dragged into whatever display ad you want to have or performance ad, and you can then push it out onto different networks such as Facebook or LinkedIn. Okay. There's also direct connections between LinkedIn and the likes of HubSpot as well to enable you to get that extra layer of personalization, to get match rates between HubSpot and LinkedIn. From Alex's perspective, Alex, I'll let you go through the offline execution from a HubSpot perspective. It's probably, it's your piece, so I'll let you take that bit away.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of people at the moment are sort of still questioning why direct mail is still important, but I think it stems from a lot of the digital channels not quite executing or delivering the response rates or results that they wanted. So we built Reach Desk because we were frustrated by just having an online execution. I think it's really important to stress that direct mail, it's not like a smoking gun or a silver bullet or anything. It should be used in tandem with your data, what you're doing online and everything. But what we're all about is like personalizing the communication so that when it physically lands on someone's desk, it can create real surprise and delight. It can create engagement. The open rates on direct mail are in the high 90s. But the important part is when you do land something physical, whether it's a personalized bottle of champagne because that person just got a new job as a CMO, for example, like you did, Andy, then you need to be using the digital channels to follow up off the back of it, using phone, email, LinkedIn, and then knitting that together quite nicely.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, so in terms of, Alex mentioned something before about keeping your TAM up to date. And I just wanted to make it applicable from a Leadfeeder perspective as well to see, so people understand where Leadfeeder fit into this. Now, Leadfeeder can do a couple of different things, and I see it as being the gel that helps align both marketing and sales in terms of from a content perspective as well as a prospecting perspective from sales. So let's take it from a digital and content perspective, we're feeding back in the entire time which companies are coming via the content that you're pushing out. So you're able to understand, okay, company A is looking at all of this specific content. At the same time, what we're able to do with that information is produce more of that type of content. So by using Leadfeeder, we're able to understand which companies from our total addressable market are actually visiting our website, right? Which content is dragging them there in the first place so that we can double down on that type of content. From a digital perspective, it's also showing us which channel is performing to bring those TAM accounts, so those total addressable market accounts, and from which tier, so that we can further double down into those digital channels as well, right? Bring them back to the site, get them to convert, and then push them into the HubSpot or whatever CRM tool you're using. From a sales perspective, it will also show you, it will also give the sales team or SDR team some priority in terms of which ones to follow up with first. So typically people would only start following up with companies when they know that they've actually done a hard conversion. So they've downloaded a white paper, they filled a form, or we've sent them something and they've somehow connected with us. With Leadfeeder, what you're able to do is you're actually able to see those ones that haven't filled out a form, for example. But you're able to understand, okay, one of my total addressable market accounts has come to the website. Therefore, they must be interested in what we have to offer. There's some sort of interest there. It's seeing that from an intent perspective, you may be able to see from which type of pages they're looking at. If they're reviewing pricing pages, for example, that will give you a good indication that they're further down the funnel. That's something that you need to pick up the phone to soon. So as I said, it's just Leadfeeder sits in the middle there in terms of being able to feedback to marketing, what content is working, what advertising is working, at the same time give sales priority. On top of that, from a TAM build perspective, as Alex mentioned previously, it will help you build out more companies into your total addressable market as well. So if you're recognizing companies that are frequenting your website quite often, it's able to say, okay, what type of company is this? Maybe we need to broaden our ICP, and maybe we also need to push that company into our TAM as well. Okay, so I'll give you a summary, and this was a summary I mentioned around what type of stack we should go and look into in terms of keeping things simple, not breaking the bank with anything, and being able to execute across online and offline. Okay, so the company that we just mentioned there, small enough team, right? They're using a CRM of HubSpot. They're also using HubSpot for their marketing automation. So they're using it for email, landing page builds, things like that. For their total addressable market data. So to build that total addressable market, they're using two tools. ZoomInfo and BuildWith. ZoomInfo gives them the company information. BuildWith is giving them the technology information, which is all being synced back into their CRM. Their contact data is coming from ZoomInfo and LeadIQ. As I mentioned to you before, they were able to get a number of contacts from ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo is very strong in the US, but didn't have great contacts for them in the UK. Therefore, they needed to also put Lead IQ on top of that. From an intelligence perspective, informing the sales and marketing teams in terms of which content is performing, and also giving prioritization to the sales team and follow-up, they're using Leadfeeder. From a personalization perspective, taking that HubSpot CRM data and also data that they've gotten from the likes of BuiltWith, etc., are using a tool called Influ2, which is then enabling them to advertise on that personal level on the online execution side. And then from an offline perspective, with direct mail, such as they're using ReachDesk. With ReachDesk, I've used them in a previous life as well. From my perspective, running direct mail campaigns by yourself is incredibly difficult, right? It's very manual and time consuming. It is possible, but it's essentially creating a warehouse within the office, which is then sending mail out. I've done it. It's been successful doing it by myself, but it's been expensive and very, very time consuming. I will note, though, that generally, as a rule of thumb, I think that direct mail is a very, very good performing channel. I think for years it 10, 15 years ago, maybe longer, 20 years ago, was a very overused channel. Nowadays, it works very well, especially if you get your campaign right. But my advice is, if you're doing direct mail, you need to get the campaign right as well. Don't just expect it to perform. You need to be. People are starting to realize that it's a performing channel. Therefore, more people are starting to use it. So the more creative you are with it, the better results you're going to get. Alex, would you agree there?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it doesn't have to be just at a campaign level. We have about 20 different triggers that we use. So we have in ReachDesk about 20 different use cases. I gave a job change example. Someone might have received funding. You might do something around like how to get 20/20 vision on your website visitors, for example, for you guys. I'm just giving you that for free, Andy. But you can have lots of different triggers that you can use within your sales team or your CS team. You might have a customer that just had a baby, for example. You might want to send a Leadfeeder branded baby grow. It's a moment that matters to them. So it doesn't just have to be campaign level. It can be, it should be based on triggers as well. And when you knit the two together, you can do some really powerful stuff. And that's where your response rates go from 5 to 10% to 40 to 50%. So use it wisely. It's an expensive channel, as you mentioned, but now you can integrate it with your CRM. You can do some good stuff and then track it effectively.
Okay. So this this summary here is, there are other tools out there. If you're looking to get ABM up and running, I would suggest trying this, right? I've seen success with it before. It's a simple stack, and there is no tool there is no one tool that will solve all the world's problems. If people are claiming to be one tool to solve all the world's problems, then they're probably very, very expensive. And I personally, as a decision maker on these type of stacks, I probably wouldn't go with it. First of all, because of the expense, but also at the same time, I think it would be too good to be true. A number of people that I spoke to that are ABM experts as well would also probably agree with me there. Anything that I've ever posted on LinkedIn, for example, around ABM has triggered some interesting debates around it. And the general consensus is that there is no one-size-fits-all tool, but it's hard to get the stack right. Each of these different tools that I mentioned here are, first of all, not too expensive, and second of all, they all work because I've used them all. So I can stand behind them and say they actually all work. So as we move on, just before we go to questions, there's a couple of little goodies that myself and Alex would like to give out just because of the time of year it is. So just from a Leadfeeder perspective, we're freezing our 29 pricing for the next couple of weeks. Just beware, in January 2020, we'll be increasing to our 2020 pricing, but for the next couple of weeks, we're freezing the pricing. So if anybody on this call is on a light or a trial, move on. It would be good for you guys to take a look into that. There'll be more information sent by mail afterwards. Any of our existing customers are on this call. Don't worry, your pricing stays as is. And Alex, from your perspective in ReachDesk, you guys also have a little goodie to give out as well, right?
Yeah, we're not changing our pricing or anything, but anyone who's, as promised before, is joined this live webinar, we'll send you all a little e-gift card from ReachDesk. So we're not just about sending physical direct mail and gifts and that kind of thing. We send like e-gifts, digital gifts as well. So you guys will all receive something from us as a result. So look forward to that.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so before we finish up, we've got a bit of time for questions, and I've seen a couple of questions flow in via the channel here. So I'm just going to try go through them because there's a couple of different chat windows here that I have in front of me. So let me just take a look at the questions. So I'm going to start with the upvoted ones. There's quite a few. So first question is, can we get a copy of this review afterwards? Yes, of course, we can provide a recording of this webinar. What would count as too many or too few companies on your ABM list? So I can give a bit of feedback there. I think, like, look, it depends on what type of marketing you want to do towards these companies. So if you've got like very few companies on your list, you can do it. But there's still a certain law of numbers here. You know, you're still going to have certain conversion rates between what actually turns into business and what doesn't. So the more companies you're going to have on your list, the better. However, if you're overwhelmed by the amount of data, my suggestion would be to try to tier out that data to give you some prioritization. If you've got a low amount of companies that you're selling into, so if your market's quite small or what you do is very, very niche, I would still recommend doing the tiering approach. I would just look at saying, okay, it depends on my cost of what I'm selling. How long does it typically take for me to earn that money back from a marketing perspective? So what's my customer acquisition cost versus when I actually get the money back, my payback period? And look, I would suggest if it's very, very low, you need to take a more personalized approach. Face-to-face is always the best way to go when it comes to that. So if you're looking for face-to-face time with your customer base, do things like small events, breakfast seminars, dinners, in classy locations. So if you're going in and you're in a very niche space, it tends not to be the cheapest of products. So you probably are selling enterprise size deals, right, or larger deals. Therefore, I would suggest, you know, a more personalized approach around the things like, for example, direct mail, right? You can do very, very personalized direct mail pieces, as well as smaller events. If you have a larger list, then it's easier from a digital perspective because you've got more accounts to go chasing. So for example, when you go and you work on things like LinkedIn or display advertising, you really only start to see results when you have a larger list, right? Alex, anything else you want to provide there?
No, not on that one. Can I pick one of these questions?
Absolutely. Do you have, so let me see what the next, what kind of KPI could you set up to measure your ABM efforts when you're a new beginner, Alex?
What kind of KPIs? Yeah, I think it's a really important thing. We don't measure things on like a lead basis. You know, don't look at like MQL or lead score as such. With ABM, I think the overall metric that is the most important is the revenue one, right? Everyone should be accountable and working towards the same thing. If you're doing ABM for the sake of generating more leads, then it's not really account-based marketing. Whereas if you want to really nail ABM, you've got to go all the way from the start of the life cycle to the point at which someone actually leaves you as a customer. Okay, which ideally won't happen if you do ABM right, but throughout the whole life cycle and go, right, we have to put a revenue goal on this. So it's always the dollar value for me.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think you don't need to break your head about that revenue goal. My advice would be look at when you've created your tiers, understand what type of revenue you can get from each of those tiers and see how many interactions you're getting from each of those different tiers. So what's turning into opportunity phase with each of those, how much of it is actually closing, how much of it is actually that level of revenue which we're expecting given the tier, right? That's also important. But to keep it simple would be my advice based on what Alex just said, and revenue is the best place to start. If you want to turn marketing into a commercial org, you have to be basing it off revenue.
Yeah, and I think you should be measuring things like it's not just around response rates and that kind of thing, but if your close rates are getting higher because you're having a more focused approach, then that's a good sign. If your existing customers are producing more referrals than they did before, then that's a fantastic sign because you've nailed the advocacy side of things. So within the revenue element, you can measure close rates, average contract value, customer lifetime value, the referrals that you're getting from your existing customers underneath that, but it has to be tied to that number.
Yeah, I agree. Just looking at the next question here. At which levels would you customize content to be applicable to these people, as in headlines, images, entire pages, entire videos? Alex, what do you think?
So what was the question? Is it more around?
So it's around how, I think it's around the deepness of the personalization that you go to. So like I can give an example from my side. I think my best advice would be to look at what resources you have at hand from a marketing perspective, as well as which tools you're using. So there are a number of tools which you can use, which we mentioned before, which take out the resource that you need from having to go ultra personalized. So you can use tools such as HubSpot, for example, with their CMS. They have, if you've got your website running on HubSpot, you can put a personalization token in any landing page that people land on, and based off their job title, for example, the content or pieces of that content will change based on who the persona visiting is. And there's many pieces of technology like that aren't that expensive. Alex, what are your thoughts there, mate?
Yeah, I like that, Andy. I've used it in the past. Some people don't see first name, last name, job title as personalization anymore. They see it as table stakes. So it is hard to kind of progress that beyond that, because you've got to have a massive like suite or stack to really get it down to a granular level. But I'd say at minimum, you need to be trying to personalize things like landing pages. To put someone's name in it in 2020, it's going to be so easy. As you say, HubSpot does that really simply. A lot of websites, and if you work in e-commerce, that can be done simply as well. But that's becoming like the table stakes element. So make sure you're at least personalizing to a basic level, and then try and progress that beyond that.
Yeah, exactly. There was another question just around how big the marketing team at Leadfeeder is. The marketing team at Leadfeeder is less than 10. I think I think it's important though that when you're doing ABM, that it needs to be a mix of everybody within the organization. So one thing that I mentioned early on, and Alex also reinforced it, was around this alignment piece, that everybody, if you're running an ABM piece, that everybody in the organization that's in a commercial role at least, needs to be focused on it. But it can even breed a little bit deeper into the product organization, for example, as well. If they want customer feedback, if they want prospect feedback, it's easy for them to put them in front of the customer or prospect. If you know who those prospects and customers could be, you can also send them out to things like events and different things like that, so that they understand exactly what's happening out in the space. You can recognize those events based on who's in your total addressable market and who will be attending those events, for example. Speakers, for example, from those specific companies could be at the event. Somebody from product could be sitting there understanding, okay, what does the customer need? What's needed within our total addressable market? Things like that. So I wouldn't just focus on the marketing team, but in terms of firing power or resource needed to manage all of these different tools and bits, what I've just presented there is more than manageable with a small marketing team, 5 people, for example. Even smaller, you could do with a couple of people. I would always just say, look, the hardest work comes in where the content creation is, and also with the prospect or with the personas. Try to, right, if it's too many personas, break it down into 2, right, and go chase those 2, and then have a broader message as well, which should catch more people. You know, like, start small, don't go too crazy with it, and build it out. Alex, what do you think, mate?
Yeah, I totally agree. I've been in that mess in the past myself, where I tried to go too broad at the beginning. That I've always said, sell to everyone, close no one. So if you try and do that really broad spectrum because you think it's a really good idea, you go, oh, we can be hyper personalized here, hyper personalized there, then you might get yourself into a bit of a muddle. So I think if you're starting out, start small, go with the with the obvious ones. If you've already got customers, then talk to them. Like, work out who was involved in the buying process. Like, who were the key decision makers that were involved when they were buying your platform, and they'll map that out for you. Just don't come armed with any kind of agenda, and just go, look, I just want to try and understand how this works within your organization, and usually you'll find the answer there.
Fully agree, Alex. So I'm just, there's a couple of notes here that are sort of overlapping. There was one just around the direct mail piece, Alex, and this would be the best for you to answer, obviously. It says there's a couple of the same. So if direct mail is better, what's the best thing to send? So in your opinion, Alex, what's the best? What has worked well?
What has worked well? It doesn't need to be expensive. We've run campaigns where people send really expensive things like iPad preloaded apps in. But that's not really what we're trying to advocate here. I can speak from some of the things that we did last year. You've got to think about a couple of elements here, right? The timeliness to it. So you might want to do like a seasonal campaign, like a Halloween campaign for a specific audience. Let's say it's businesses or prospects that have been ghosting you, that you've got into a certain stage of your pipeline that are a qualified opportunity. So you can do something really simple with a black box with your own branded tape, a little handwritten note, and some chocolate ghosts. Send it to those prospects. Follow up as soon as you know it lands, and say, hey, yeah, you've gone off the radar a little bit. I'm not sure if you're ghosting me. Think of a catchy line, and then that might cost you 10 quid to do per send. The response rates from when we did that were sort of in the 70-80%, because it's themed around Halloween, it's themed around a specific target audience. The note that went with it was personalized, and yeah, it creates a bit of fun, and it's also is very shareable. So you can start sharing it around the office, and it creates a good level of engagement. So it comes down to what you're actually really trying to achieve with that. If you sent that to a cold prospect, they're not ghosting you, there's nothing relevant there, so your response rates can be lower. So it totally depends on the stage that your target account is at, the message and the call to action, as well as how you follow up.
Relevancy is key there. So like, from my perspective, you should be using the tools that you have in order to understand what's happening in the market space. So let me give you a real life example of a campaign that I ran for direct mail previously myself. So in a previous industry that I was working, McDonald's bought a marketing automation tool. So McDonald's, isn't the fast food company, US fast food company, bought a marketing automation tool about a year ago at this point, a company called Dynamic Yield. And they were a direct competitor of ours. And we knew that, that potentially Dynamic Yield customers might be thinking, oh, McDonald's just bought our marketing automation provider. That's not typically their business model. So interesting. So we followed up a direct mail campaign, but it was a very quickly put together because you only had a certain limited amount of time. And we essentially sent all of their customer base Burger King vouchers, with some interesting messaging around, there's more than one provider out there, right? Why don't we meet up for a burger, right? And it didn't cost much to do, but we got the trigger based off information that obviously from the industry, but you can also get other pieces of information triggered from things like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, where it will tell you information about what's happening with companies such as acquisitions, or if they're getting additional rounds of funding, or who that funding has come from, etc. And that gave us a trigger to say, okay, let's act quick. We got it out in about 2 days. We probably pissed a lot of people off in terms of the Dynamic Yield guys. But it was something, it's something that worked. Another thing as well, as Alex mentioned, is, is being more creative around things. So, and also having something that people will use around the office. So things such as we used to, having worked in the e-commerce space before, we used to send out Black Friday survival kits out to e-commerce companies. So about 2 to 3 weeks before Black Friday, we knew that their marketing teams were very, very up to their eyes. So we'd send them out a nice care package, which would be branded with their brand plus the brand that I was working for, and it worked incredibly well. It depends on, again, with your how much it costs to get what your payback period with your customers, what your customer acquisition costs. If they're high, you can go a little bit higher in direct mail efforts. If they're lower, go lower. But even in going lower, you'd be surprised what you can get out of sending somebody a coffee voucher, just to pick up the phone and be able to give your SDR a reason to call. That's, there was one question from Igor just around what tool symbol was near Google, LinkedIn, and Facebook on that slide I had previously. That was a company called Metadata, does display advertising. What is the best to do with ABM, a video, photo, or carousel advertisement? It depends. It really does depend. It's how long is a piece of string. I think it's really a matter of testing, see what does work with your target audience. There's always, whatever marketing you're doing, regardless if it's ABM or if it's traditional, there's always going to be a certain level of testing involved to understand what works with your target base, what doesn't. If you're starting off with a completely blank canvas, go in low with your bids, make sure that you're testing and getting that feedback and actually implementing the feedback. And let me see, that's it on the questions page here. There's also some other, I just want to go through the other questions that may have come through in the chat. I see people have been very involved in the chat, which is great to see. So Russell asked a question around buyer intent playing into people's ABM. Anyone watching have any knowledge of buyer intent? So yes, buyer intent is the next big thing, I would say. So from a Leadfeeder perspective, we can offer buyer intent because you understand which sites or which pages are being visited by specific companies. So it gives you the specific intent. You're also able to do, you're able to create certain custom feeds within Leadfeeder to see what type of page has been looked at. If somebody's been looking at your pricing page, for example, trigger a notification to say this company has been looking at your pricing page, right? That's a very deep level of buyer intent, okay? With the other platforms, if you're in the tech space, such as G2 Crowd, Trust Radius, Capterra, they also offered their buyer intent data. Those buyer intent data tend to come from companies such as Leadfeeder. So Leadfeeder would typically be working in the background to provide that type of data. And yeah, so but from a buyer intent perspective, this is going to play a big role in the next 2 years, I would say. You know, in the past year and a half or so, maybe 2 years, people have been talking about it, but it's going to play an even bigger role. There was one other question that just mentioned here, just about Marketo. How does this stack integrate with Marketo? It integrates perfectly with Marketo. These are just examples of tools that could be used. Marketo is typically an enterprise product. My experience with Marketo is it's a very good tool, but you need to have somebody that's very, very good at marketing automation in order to run it. And it's a very powerful tool, but quite difficult to get integrated and set up generally. Yeah. So look, we're on the hour mark now, and I'm wary of everybody's time. So Alex, thank you so much. It's been a great hour. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Andy. It's been great, mate. I've really enjoyed this. So pleasure to be part of it. And yeah, looking forward to sending out those gift cards to all those live attendees after. But thanks for having me. And thanks for all the questions, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Andy. Bye.